Mason Wells is standing on a strip mall roof at 6 in the morning, typing a message he doesn't have to send. Half a day off, Tuesday afternoon. Personal reasons. He types it. He deletes it. He types it again. Behind him, 4 rooftop units hum in the gray light. 3 of the buildings under his boots belong to him. 19 years ago, a message like that decided whether he ate that week. This morning, nobody on earth can tell him no. His thumb is still moving. Here's the thing, nobody explains about money. It doesn't buy you things. Not really. Things are just the receipt. What money actually buys is the right to stop asking. And a man doesn't ask once. He asks in a pattern, over and over, in specific rooms, to specific people, in a specific tone of voice he only uses for them. Mason could name every one of those rooms. He'd been standing in them since he was 19. There are 6 permissions that money takes off a working man's back. 6 names holding 6 pens. He got all 6 of them back. Took him most of his adult life. And on an ordinary Tuesday morning, with the work already done and the whole afternoon sitting there empty, he found out about the 7th one. Currently, more than half of American workers leave paid vacation days unused every single year. Not because the days don't exist, because asking for them costs something the days aren't worth. Mason knew that cost by heart. He'd paid it every summer for 19 years, so watch what his thumb is doing. That's the whole story. 6 locks opened. 1 key nobody ever handed out. Start at the bottom, because that's where the asking starts. $17.50 an hour, second-year tech, still riding shotgun, still carrying somebody else's gauges up somebody else's ladder. His mother had a procedure scheduled on a Thursday. He needed 4 hours. 4 hours. That's it. He wrote it out on a paper form in the shop office, and then he stood in the doorway of Dale Kessler's office holding it, waiting to be noticed. That's the part people forget. It isn't the form. It's the standing. Dale was the service manager. 50s, reading glasses pushed up on his head, a coffee mug older than the building. He was a decent man. That's what made it worse. He looked at the paper for maybe 3 seconds, said, "Go take care of your mom," signed it, handed it back, kind, fast, no hesitation at all. And Mason walked back out to the van with a lump in his throat. He couldn't explain to anybody, because a yes and a no come from the same place. Somebody has to be able to give you one for the other one to mean anything. Dale wasn't a villain. Dale was a nice guy with a pen. That's the invisible ceiling nobody warned you about. It isn't made of cruelty. It's made of somebody else's calendar, somebody else's mood, somebody else's decent morning. You can work for good people your whole life and still never once make a plan you didn't have to run by someone. So Mason did what everybody assumes he did. He got out, except he didn't. He stayed at that shop for another 7 years after he stopped needing the paycheck. 7 years of clocking in for money he didn't need, from a man who couldn't have fired him if he tried. And that decision tells you more about him than any of the buildings ever will. The second ask isn't to a boss. It's to a stranger who's never met you and never will. Small-town bank, 2nd floor, carpet the color of oatmeal. A woman named Nadine ran the file. Nadine did not do warmth. Nadine did math. Mason wanted a flex unit, not a nice one. Concrete block, 2 roll-up doors, sitting behind a truck weigh station on the wrong side of the highway. Roof leaked in 2 corners. Nobody had wanted it in 4 years. He'd walked that building's roof 40 times fixing units for the previous owner. He knew exactly what the mechanicals cost, because he was the mechanicals. That's the whole edge. Not a market call. Not a market call. Just knowing the real number on something ugly, because he'd been paid $9 an hour to crawl around inside it. Nadine went through his file in front of him, slow, page by page. Then she said it was boring in the best way. Mason has been given exactly 2 compliments in his life that he still thinks about. That's one of them. Currently, roughly 4 out of 5 small business loan applications get turned down. Most of them for the same reason. The person asking wanted something exciting. Excitement is expensive to underwrite. Boring is cheap. But understand what that meeting really was. He sat in a chair in front of a stranger and waited to find out if he was allowed to own something. He signed. He got the keys. He drove out past the way station with a folder on the passenger seat. 2 tenants. A block building nobody wanted. 60% of the tenants in that building didn't know his name for the first 2 years, and that was on purpose. Keep that building in mind. What it paid him is going to matter in about 4 minutes. July, 96 degrees. The compressor on his own building died at 10 in the morning. $2,800. Now, in the old life, that number sets off a chain. You call somebody. You explain. You wait for approval. You get told to patch it and revisit next quarter. Mason drove to the supply house, bought the part with a debit card, climbed his own ladder. Nobody signed anything. Nobody was told. Done by 11:40. And standing up there, sweating through his shirt, he had the strangest feeling. Not pride, something quieter than that. He'd fixed 10,000 machines in his life. This was the first one he was allowed to just fix. Same day, out in the employee lot, Wendell was showing everybody his phone. Wendell was 34, good hands, loud laugh, and he'd just been approved for a new dually. Crew cab. Every option. They approved me for way more than I asked for, Wendell said, and he said it grinning. Sit with that sentence for a second, because it's the saddest one in this whole story. He was proud of the size of his permission. Mason didn't say anything. Mason had a compressor to invoice himself for. By the way, if you want the actual mechanics of money without the polish and the noise, subscribe. This channel is going to keep taking these things apart slowly. So, 3 permissions gone. The shift, the loan, the repair. The building behind the way station was paying him $1,150 a month per tenant, every month, whether he got out of bed or not. Nobody's approval required, nobody's calendar, nobody's decent morning, which raises a problem, because there was still one request Mason typed out almost every week, on a phone, standing up, usually alone. He sent it to nobody. He'd been sending it to nobody for a long time. The 4th ask doesn't come from a boss or a bank. It comes from everybody else. It's the permission to be understood. Mason drove a 19-year-old pickup with a cracked mirror housing he never bothered to fix. He picked up weekend calls he didn't need. He wore the same 4 shirts, and people wanted an explanation for that. Wendell caught him in the employee lot one evening, leaning on the tailgate, half friendly and half something else. "You could get out of this, man. Why are you still here?" Mason said the truck ran fine. That wasn't an answer. It was a door closing softly, because the real answer took 20 minutes, and Wendell didn't want 20 minutes. He wanted a reason he could file away and stop thinking about. Here's what nobody tells you about getting ahead quietly. You don't get applause. You get questions you're not allowed to answer honestly. Then there's family, which is worse. His sister Renee needed $19,000. Business idea, decent one, terrible timing. Mason could have written the check that afternoon and never noticed it. He didn't. He sat down with her at her place on a Saturday and opened a notebook instead. Then the next Saturday. Then 8 more after that. Money without readiness doesn't build anything. It just goes faster in whatever direction you were already headed. She knew he had it. That's the part that sat in the room with them. By the 4th Saturday, she was short with him. By the 6th, she stopped offering him coffee. He was right. He's still pretty sure he was right, and he drove home feeling like the cheapest man in the county. Currently, around 2/3 of American adults say they've never had a real conversation about money with their own family. Not a fight, a conversation. Mason understood why now. The conversation costs more than the money does. So there he was. Nobody could deny him a day off. Nobody could deny him a loan, a repair, a decision, a direction. Nobody could tell him no anymore. So why was he still standing around waiting for somebody to say yes? The 5th ask is the one about staying. Whether you get to keep the place you're standing in. Whether somebody else decides when you move. On a Wednesday in March, Mason's phone rang while he was pulling filters on a rooftop in the rain. It was Dale. Not Shop Dale, not the man with the pen. Dale from the parent company now, 3 levels up, calling about cold storage. They needed 4,200 square feet with power already run to it. Short notice. Someone had told him about a block building behind the way station. Dale didn't know it was Mason's. He found out about 90 seconds into the call. There was a pause on the line. Not a bad one. Just a man rearranging 19 years in his head. "Well," Dale said. "All right then." And then he asked, rates, terms, whether it was available. Mason stood there in the rain with a filter in his hand and waited to feel something enormous. He didn't, because Dale was doing the exact same thing Mason used to do in that doorway. He had a boss. He had a budget he didn't set. He'd been holding a pen that was never his either. The gatekeeper was just a guy who'd been handed a key ring and told to stand there. That night Mason opened the spreadsheet. 1 tab, no color, no charts. $9,400 a month across 4 buildings. That's it. 1 line of black text, sitting in a row, with no exclamation point anywhere near it. He looked at it for maybe 4 seconds and closed the laptop. 5 permissions. Gone. The shift. The loan. The repair. The explanation. The place. Every lock he'd ever been able to name was open. And the following Tuesday morning, standing on a roof at 6 a.m., his thumb started typing a message to a man who wasn't his boss anymore. The 6th one he signed himself. Wrote it out on a Sunday. 2 paragraphs. Printed it at the library because he didn't own a printer. 2 weeks' notice, 19 years. Thank you. Nobody had to approve it. That's what made his hands shake a little. And the reveal, if you want to call it that, happened at 11 in the morning on an ordinary Tuesday. The units were serviced. The invoices were sent. The rent had cleared on the 1st. Mason sat down on the parapet wall of a building he owned and realized he had 7 hours of daylight and absolutely nothing he was required to do with them. So he took out his phone and opened a message to Dale. Half a day off. Tuesday afternoon. Personal reasons. He typed the whole thing. Every word of it. To a man who no longer employed him, about hours nobody was counting, on a day that belonged to him completely. That's the 7th permission. The 6 on the list are held by other people, and money can buy all 6 of them back. That part actually works. That part is real. The 7th one is held by a 19-year-old kid standing in a doorway with a paper form in his hand, waiting to be noticed. Nobody issued that key, so nobody can take it back. And that kid never got the memo. He's still in there, and he still thinks rest is something you have to be granted, which brings us back to Wendell in the parking lot, grinning about the size of his approval. Wendell was asking out loud. Mason was asking in silence. Same request, same pen. Wendell just had the honesty to say it where people could hear him. Currently, close to half of American workers report feeling guilty when they take time off they've already earned. Earned. Already paid for. You can pay off the house and still be renting your own afternoon. Mason didn't send the message. He also didn't delete it. Not that day. He just sat there on the wall with it open, a 51-year-old man with 4 buildings and no idea who he was supposed to ask. 6 weeks later, he's sitting on the empty wooden bleachers at a neighborhood ball field, 11 blocks from the building behind the way station. Nobody's playing. It's a Tuesday. It's 2:14 in the afternoon. He's got a bottle of water and a bad view of an outfield fence that needs paint. He's not celebrating anything. There's nothing here to celebrate. He pulls out the phone. The draft is still sitting there, 6 weeks old, half a day off, Tuesday afternoon. Personal reasons. He reads it one more time, and then he deletes it, doesn't send it, doesn't save it. That's the whole event. That's the biggest thing that happens in this story. He sits there for 40 minutes and does nothing at all. That morning, sunrise came at 6:02, and for the first time in 19 years, he wasn't standing on a roof to see it. The freedom didn't arrive when the rent cleared. It didn't arrive when the 4th building closed, or when Dale called, or when the number crossed 9,000. It arrived on a wooden bench in the middle of a workday, when a man finally stopped filing a request with a boy who'd been dead for 30 years. Boring buildings gave him the afternoon. Nobody could give him permission to sit in it. So here's what I'd actually like to know from you. When was the last time you did something for yourself without quietly checking, somewhere in the back of your head, whether you'd earned it? Tell me in the comments. Not the big things. The small one. The afternoon. Because most people can tell you their salary. Very few can tell you the last time they didn't ask.